like to call this meeting of the Loveland Board of Education to order for the purpose of a work session this. And I will, it's what time is it? 6:04. And ask Mr. Giuffre for a roll call.
Mr. Doherty.
Here.
Dr. Lorenz.
Here.
Ms. Pettit.
Here.
Dr. Schweitzer.
Here.
Mrs. Washburn.
Here. All present. First item on the agenda is the adoption of the board agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
I
Second.
hear Ms. Pettit, and then I'll take Ms. Washburn as a second, if that's all right, and then Mr. Doherty can be the third. Any questions about the agenda? You will see that the first item on the agenda is to enter into executive session. So for the purposes of those who are listening to us online or seeing this as a video, please know that there is business that will be conducted after this executive session. Often we have executive sessions at the end of the meeting, but this one will not be that way. The other items on the agenda are there and will be discussed at the time. While I'm pontificating at this moment, I will also let people in the audience know that this is obviously a different setup than we have used before. And so you are seeing a view of the entire board at the moment. I believe that there will be zooming in when individual people are speaking during the meeting, but you will just see a different look than you're used to seeing when we were in a Zoom meeting. Are there any questions or is there any discussion about the board agenda? Seeing none, Mr. Giuffre, can we vote on that?
Ms. Pettit.
Yes.
Ms. Washburn.
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz.
Yes.
Dr. Schweitzer.
Yes.
Mr. Doherty.
Yes.
Motion carried. As I mentioned, the first item on the agenda is a resolution asking to enter into executive session pursuant to ORC Section 121.22G1. That is concerning employment of a public employee. And so we need a motion to enter into executive session.
I move.
Second.
Ms. Pettit moved and Dr. Swetchnow seconded.
I'm going to do all of them.
Before we have the vote on that, if we do vote to go into executive session, we will be inviting Superintendent, Treasurer, Legal Counsel, Bronson McCoy is here this evening, and we are also inviting Jonathan Eilert, our newly elected board member, into executive session with us. Okay, Mr. Giuffre, can we vote on that?
Ms. Pettit.
Yes.
Dr. Schweitzer.
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes.
Mr. Doherty.
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz.
Yes, motion carried. I have us going in at 6:07. We will be leaving this room, correct?
No, I believe we're staying here.
Oh, we're going to stay
Gonna
here.
Cut the video and we're going to stay here.
All right, very good. Thank you.
I have to look over my shoulder.
You're in.
And we are back. Just to let audience know, we came out of executive session at 8:02. Been a couple of minutes of getting back into session here, and we will get into our agenda in just a moment. But before we do that, just so that I know that Ms. Pettit likes to adjourn the meeting at the end and get out quickly. So I wanted to make sure that we recognized her this evening for her dedication and service to the school district. I know she did a lot for the school district before she became a board member, but this is in recognition of her years of service on the board from 2014 to 2021. So on behalf of all of the board, we would like to thank you for your service. And this is all for that, but I wanted you to be able to see it.
Try not to scare you.
The publisher, whatever that is, publishing.
It's a bouquet with orange on it, but I wanted to say thank you on behalf of the entire staff and the administration. It means a lot to the staff to have somebody who understands what employees go through, having a former employee. It means a lot to your experience of being able to take care of our employees. And I've heard nothing but great things. I wish I could work with you longer, but I wish you nothing but the best. I say thank you very much. Thank you.
Would you like to say?
I'm gonna miss everybody.
Well, we're
I'm gonna miss everybody. And we still have a pizza trailer up there, so I'll still be volunteering.
So everybody come see Michelle at the pizza
Oh,
trailer.
yay.
Thank you very
Just
much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. And I love Loveland schools. I will continue to love Loveland schools, and you'll never know where you might see me next.
Well, we hope we see you at some more board meetings because you have so much fun when you're here. So
I
you
do,
should come back.
but yeah. Goodness gracious.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle.
Oh, my God.
But now we're going to make you,
Now I have to go back to work.
yes, you have to keep working for a little bit.
We'll let you make the motions.
So the first item on the agenda following executive session is the first reading of the 2022-2023 calendar. And Mr. Carlier is going to present that for us.
Good evening, everybody. Ms. Pettit, again, thank you for your service. For the first person getting to speak here after the presentation there, I want to make sure to echo all those things Mr. Broadwater said. I am here to talk a little bit about our first reading of our calendar. Board members, you have some notes that in the administrative section, and also the draft of the calendar is in board docs for all of our viewers who are watching. A couple of things that I would like to do would just be to point out some of the things that are unlike our, what I would call, quote, traditional calendar that we have had here in Loveland the past couple of years. The first thing I want to make sure to draw your attention to is the October in-service day that in the past has been just before the end of the first quarter. Like this school year, it was a couple of school days before the first quarter ended. We have made a change to move it to be connected to the end of the quarter. So it created a 4-day weekend instead of 2 different 3-day weekends for our parents. We got some feedback that that was something that we wanted to take a look at. Something else I want to draw to your attention to is in the month of November, Thanksgiving is a time at which there are a lot of people who are traveling, whether that is people in our community, it could be staff members. It's a difficult time for us to find substitutes, although substitutes have been difficult to find here the past couple of years anyway. So we were working with LEA and our OPSI groups, trying to take a look at what we could do to have Thanksgiving break, because it is the most heavily traveled holiday, for that to be some more time built around that piece. So in this particular draft, you can see that the Monday, Tuesday of Thanksgiving week are also non-school days. I just mentioned that the OPSI and LEA groups, I would like the board to know that we sat down with both of those groups and kind of worked through some of these things with the calendar. And what I would have to say is that, you know, everybody comes to this with a different perspective. There isn't a, quote, perfect calendar, but I am really happy and satisfied with the folks that I got to work with, very positive attitudes. And any of the changes that we're proposing were things that as a group we were coming up with together, trying to make the calendar a better fit for everyone. Moving along to the second half of the year, the next thing I want to bring up is historically, like for this school year, spring break is at the end of March. And in this particular calendar, you'll see that it's moved to the first week of April. And that's going to help us with a couple of different pieces. It encompasses some holidays that are in there. And we feel like it's going to be a smart move for our district. And calendar-wise, just so you know, the number of staff days are the same and the number of student days are also the same. So the changes in the calendar are things that are, it's movement of days, but not decreasing student days or an increase in that for staff as well. The last thing I want to bring up is this idea of a rolling start. So if you kind of go back to the beginning of the calendar, I just want to make sure that people know our preschool and kindergarten at LECC, we have had a quote rolling start for a number of years. We're taking a look at the advantages of that rolling start, and we're going to be taking a look at that for not just LECC, but all of our buildings. So you can see on August 15th and August 16th, you can see it's listed as first day of school, and then we have that broken down by alphabet. So I wanted to make sure to get this information to you guys. You have some notes that I've given you. And of course, a calendar has to have more than one reading. So any feedback that you've got, I would be glad to work with you on it. Any questions?
I'll just comment at this point that I do know that the administration has received some information, specifically some information about some different cultural and religious holidays that they have considered creating this calendar. I think something specifically came from the Loveland the Diversity Advisory Board. So a calendar was shared to take part of this, but this is a high-level calendar. This is not the daily calendar of what happens in our buildings. And I do know that the administration also pays attention to what goes on in the buildings and tries to make the buildings aware of the kinds of things that might affect a calendar as we go forward.
I can tell you, first of all, I want to say thanks to Mr. Collier, Mr. Ames, Ms. Connor. You would think changing a calendar wouldn't take that much time, but it takes a lot of work because you want to be empathetic and you want to be making sure that you're looking at all of the holidays, what is best for families and what works with staff. So we did work with different cultures, and we looked at the calendar and how can we stay away from some of the holidays that maybe we were not able to stay away from last time. So we were able to do that. I think it's a good, the Thanksgiving break is a good thing for families, and over the pandemic, we know how important family is, but also for our staff. I think it's a good calendar for our staff as well. So I want to thank Garth and Andrea and John for working so hard to get this through. And I think it's a good thing for our kids, our families, and for the district.
Yeah, something that you mentioned, Mr. Broadwater, some of that feedback, there has been an increased awareness around some of our activities, trying to make sure to be aware of what some different families here in our district, of different things that they might celebrate. The move of spring break encompasses one of those pieces for us, and more than one way. So I think there was, there's lots of different things to consider, but I definitely think that this is a step in the right direction. And I'm happy with, the way that the Teachers Association and our classified union were able to recognize those things as well and working together with us.
Yep.
Dr. Swetchner, do you have-
I had just two quick questions. I know they've been discussed to some degree in the past. Election Day is November 8th, and one of the election sites is the LECC building. It says no school on pre-K through 4. The other buildings aren't sites for voting, to my knowledge.
Yeah, that was something that Mr. Broadwater and I, we have talked about a little bit. In the past, first grade has been split, so not this school year, but in the past traditionally, first grade, some of first grade would have been at the LECC building and some of first grade would have been at the primary school building. As of right now, we wanted to make sure to include this. We do think that there might be, between now and then, there might be some discussions about where the polling places might be, if LECC is going to continue to be a polling place, and what we might think about with the LPS and LES campus, if they are going to continue to not be a polling place, if there's going to be a decision for us to make a change. But what I didn't want to do on this draft of the calendar was not list it and then it come in later. If anything, I wanted it to be there, and then for us to be able to remove it was the thought behind that. It's a great question, Dr. Schwetzedow.
And then the second thing is just as to extending the Thanksgiving break and keeping the number of instructional days the same, where did those extra days get added into the calendar and what shifted around?
So one piece of what happened is that we are starting just a day earlier in the school year. And then another piece would be when we move spring break from where it was before. It encompasses Good Friday now. And in our calendar this year, we have a spring break. And then the following week is Good Friday, which is the day that we have no school. And now that spring break is basically during that week, we gain another day that way as well.
And let me just ask one other question, because I know that this was a concern of one of the community members. I know it's also been discussed, but just to kind of hash it out here. Veterans Day is not, to my surprise, universally a public school holiday.
Yeah.
And we've had it that way at Loveland for as long as I know. Was there any discussion about changing that, especially as it's fairly close to Thanksgiving?
Yeah, there was discussion around that. Some things that some folks might not be aware of is that our OPSI contract has listed out different holidays that are paid holidays in there. So it's going to be something that we've talked with them and we're working with them. I think it's going to be something that they were open to the calendar ideas as a group and as individual people. They were really great to work with. But when something is embedded into their contract, it felt like something that we would want to be talking about during negotiation. So I think in future rounds of negotiations with that group is when we're going to is kind of the right time for us to take a look at Veterans Day. It is something that we discussed this current cycle for this calendar. In our next round of negotiations, we both agreed would be a great time for us to take a look at that to see if there could be changes to their contract when listing out holidays for us to consider Veterans Day being a day that maybe we are at school and as a community and all of our buildings to have some recognition of Veterans Day, bringing some community members in and veterans in and doing some really cool things. It's just going to need to take a little bit of time at that next round of negotiations, keeping those things in mind.
Great, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
I think, go ahead.
The idea of a rolling start, I think that this was the third year at Lakota that we've done that. And it's something that they said is not going away because of the relationship building that's able to be done on those days with half of a class. And I know that at least at Lakota, we are given strict instructions, no instructional time, no discussion of a syllabus, none of that. It's all relationship building and helping the students feel comfortable and getting to know them rather than getting to know the teacher. So happy to see that on there.
Great. Yeah, that was something that many other area schools are starting to take a look at. I would say overall, the overarching goal was not only for us to update some things that we felt like as a Loveland school district, but taking a look at Southwest Ohio schools and making sure that our calendar is I guess what you would say is up to date with some other things that some other districts were looking at the benefits of some things that they've done. And that was one of those pieces that we talked about. And you mentioning that Lakota does that and how they've had some success with that. I spoke with a number of different schools that had that in their calendar, and it was something that when working with OPSI and LEA, it felt like something that we could really benefit from.
Okay, it's kind of curiosity question.
Yeah.
We used to have spring break on where it coincided with Good Friday and Easter and whatnot. And then we moved it because it was said to be better to have it at the end of the third quarter so that people are not being given the homework and then having to come back. And I'm just wondering what changed our thought on that.
Well, I agree with you, and that was a part of the conversation in the past. That when that was coming into play, we were starting school much more towards the end of August. So the end of the third quarter was much later in March. And so that is when those pieces coincided. But now there was other discussions around when is second quarter going to be over and maybe that being around winter break. There was some discussion in past years around that. But in general, if you think about testing times, that's kind of a fixed time for state testing, and that's usually in the spring for our state testing. Area schools, and this is years ago, area schools were starting school earlier and had more instructional days prior to that testing time. We were starting school historically here in Loveland, this is again a number of years ago, towards the very end of August. So our instructional days before we were taking our state test, and we were, of course, are being judged and compared to everyone else. We were, and compared to some districts, they had 2 more weeks of instructional time for their students than we did. Since then, we have moved the beginning of school more towards the, I guess you would say, the beginning of August than the end, which then moved when the third quarter would be over. And when that no longer kind of when spring break around that time, where at the beginning of April, when that wasn't going to be around the third quarter, is when those two things didn't mesh in. Does that make sense, Michelle?
It does. Yeah, but, and I see that the second quarter does end at Christmas, at the Christmas break.
It does.
So that was just my concern, is how we moved there first was that people were going on vacations, but then their kids aren't enjoying them because they were slammed, especially the older ones, with reports and reading, and they couldn't enjoy their vacations. So I mean, it's gonna happen somewhere, I'm
Sure. And something else that I know that the high school was taking a look at is a lot of the assessments that you're talking about are end of course kind of assessments, and that being around the winter break time. The idea of how much assessment and how many tests kids are taking in a quote exam week at the high school is something that is being talked about. And a lot of schools are moving away from such a quote exam week, and that's something that's evolving. And I know that the high school has been taking a look at that. So I think the traditional approach might be a little bit different from where school districts are heading for the future.
And I'm going to take it that this will not affect AP exams at all?
No, So in the springtime, you're talking about spring break being moved? Yeah. There's a window of time at which you have to complete those assessments, and spring break always falls within the window. It's just if the window, whenever we're going to start, when our clock starts, whether we're going to not have school at the beginning or the middle at the end of that. All school districts are having their quote spring break during that assessment window. It's just figuring out when it's going to be. It will move it a week, but it's something that we've been kind of like dealing with and will continue to deal with. It's just a week later.
Okay. So moving forward, we're going to line up spring break again with Good Friday?
And in this proposed calendar for next school year, that is where we have spring break.
I would assume that would not always be the case because of the fact that Easter is not a fixed holiday. So sometimes it can move as late as April 26th. It can be as early as March 30th, I think.
Yeah.
So
We'll just take year by year. Because that was one of the other reasons why we moved the spring break to make it fixed, so that families knew what week they had. So now.
You're right. And that's not the only holiday that we're considering as well. There are some other holidays and with, some different cultures that some of our families might celebrate. In this particular calendar, making a move for spring break being the first week of April, it accomplished a couple of different pieces. And I feel like it was a really smart move for this particular year, depending upon where things fell. And we're going to continue to look at those type of things as we talk about calendars for not just next year, but for the future as well.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? Great.
all right, as Mr. Carter said, this is a legal requirement that there be 2 readings of the calendar. So this is the first. We'll come back to the board for approval in January.
That's right.
Okay.
All right, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we now move to superintendent update. I just thought I'd mention that I believe that Mr. Broadwater has a new name. I think I saw
Yep.
that his name is Mr. Waterbead now.
Yep.
He read to a class at LECC or LPS?
LECC.
LECC. And I saw a post that a child had come home and said, Mr. Waterbead was in our class today. So I kind of like that name. So I think that, that shows he's been out and about with the kids, the kiddos, and that's really nice.
Young man
Way,
Enzo.
Mr. Waterbead.
The young man Enzo remembered, I was playing with him with water beads a couple weeks before I was in there. I made the comment, and so he remembered playing water beads with me. I made the comment, it's a good thing we weren't playing with blocks or I'd be Mr. Blockhead. So, but that's the best part of my day is getting out and reading. And I've got to learn how to read a little bit slower. I get made fun of because I read a little fast. I got to slow it down a little bit, but our kids are just, it's awesome. It's just a great place to be. So with that, I will start the superintendent update. And I'm going to start with the topic we've talked about every time, which is our COVID and our COVID dashboard. And the biggest concern I have right now is we've come back from Thanksgiving, so we're seeing some data in terms of what happens when families get together. And last week, our COVID dashboard did not look very good. We've got higher numbers than we've seen probably all year. We ended up with 19 student positives and 4 staff positives, and that is not the direction we were hoping we would be going. I do want to make sure that we look at this week is going to tell me a lot more simply because when we look at winter break, the nice thing about winter break is our families will get together and then we'll have about a week after that where families probably won't be together as much, and it would be like this week. And so families will be able to monitor and see where everything is going, and then we'll return after that week break. But it's unfortunate that we're moving in this direction. It's not that, not the direction we wanted to go. It is concerning me. I have received emails and I read each and every one of them. I know families are concerned in both directions. And I really want to make sure that we're moving in a direction that's prudent. We want to move in a direction where masks are optional. That's where we want to be. That's where kids can see our faces and we can learn. But we also want to make sure that we're moving and doing things properly. So with that, this chart is the one I show every single board meeting as well. If you look at the lower left, that is Hamilton County. It was the last board meeting, it was at about 171, I believe, cases. We're at 294. So you can see the trend in all 4 of those. That's Claremont, Warren, and Hamilton County, which specifically are our 3 counties. We are moving in a bad direction. And the other concern, obviously, is there's another variant out there, the Omicron, if I say it correctly, that we are going to take a look at the next week or two and see what that means for us. So currently, I would just want to review again the 3-tiered decision-making framework that we have used consistently throughout all of this. The cases reach an acceptable level. The vaccine for the younger students is available, and they adjust quarantine guidelines. The good news is the second 2 were there. We're where we need to be. The vaccines are available. The few emails that I've received, the concern is they don't have enough time because vaccines are not readily available. I have checked with our medical advisory board and with some other medical professionals. They would tell me the vaccines are available and make sure you get out there and get those. But I want to make sure we're sympathetic and giving families time to make sure they get the vaccine. The cases reaching an acceptable level is my concern right now. And we'll see what this week shows us when in terms of after Thanksgiving. 2 weeks after that will really be the first week when we get back from winter break, if we use that analogy. So the decision, I am going to make sure that we get out to our families. My thought is it would be December 17th as we move towards winter break so that they are aware of where we are going with masks. when we return. Really, there's two considerations. The first consideration is the one that I really am at, it's where I'm at right now. But again, I need to take the next week or two and look at the numbers and see where the variant is going and make sure that we at least give our kiddos enough time to be safe in the classroom. But the first option is we will go mask optional when students return from winter break on January 3rd. If the students are mask optional, we will have the staff being mask optional as well. We will continue to strongly urge wearing masks as we go through the winter season. And that would be the first option. The second option is if we see the numbers continuing to rise, maybe it would make sense to take a 2-week buffer in between winter break and taking the mask, going mask optional. That would give us 2 weeks, but then we also have Martin Luther King Day off. So it actually gives us a little bit more than 2 weeks after winter break where it would be mask optional and the staff would also be mask optional. So to the Board of Education right now, I would say January 3rd is where I'm at, but it's tenuous because of the numbers I'm seeing and because of the variant that is out there. And I'm going to make sure that we don't rush a decision. We've done extremely well through this entire pandemic, and whether it means January 3rd or 2 weeks later, we just want to make sure that we're looking at the numbers and really being thoughtful on how we make the decision. The other item I have on here is TSA has extended the face mask requirement for all transportation until March 18th of 2022. If you recall, that was going to be in January. They've now moved it to March, and that is a requirement that we have no control. Federal government saying that the kids are going to have to wear face masks on the school bus until March 18th of next year. But I wanted to make sure we reminded our families of that. And I think we've got that up there. So with that, I would open it up to any questions you would have on the presentation that we give or any thoughts that you may have.
I just want to clarify to be sure what you just said was you're currently thinking of option A, but a decision of option A or option B would be announced to the board, to the district, to the families prior to leaving school for winter break. Is that correct?
It would be where I'm at right now would be December 17th date, which is a Friday, and I would put out an all call to our families and make sure it's in our newsletter and make sure all the families are aware. It just, the more time I have to look, the better. And I don't want to rush a decision.
Mike, I keep a running tally with your data week to week to week. And you're probably well aware of this, but for folks in the community that may not follow it as closely as you do, when you say 19, the closest we've had to that are a couple of 13s and an occasional 12 out there. So it's substantial. The numbers are still pretty small, but it is a substantial increase over what we have been seeing. And something that's been remarkably consistent is the ratio of cases within the district to the populations by grade. So in other words, LHS, I estimate, has about a third of our population in total, also has about a third of the cases. If you move over to some of the other buildings, LES has about 15% of the population and also has 15% of the cases. So you have two very different mitigation strategies between the upper grades and the lower grades that are maintaining, however this is working out, they're maintaining a consistent level of case counts.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, it's maybe a little bit of food for thought about when you do get to the point of changing the mitigation strategy. It's going to really probably heavily depend on the vaccination rates,
right? Whether
we're going to see any disproportional result at that point or not.
Yeah, and that's a good point. The point I would make, and we talk about it all the time in our district leadership, if you look at our high school, it's a pretty good model that vaccines, or they work because those numbers they've been unmasked throughout the year, and those numbers are similar, if not a little bit better than the other numbers. And so the concern is making sure the kids have enough time to get the vaccine. And the Omicron, I apologize if I'm saying that wrong, but I think there's still a little bit out there in terms of how fast it's going to spread and what it does. And I think the next 2 weeks will be a pretty good indication of that. But to your point, if we were able to get the vaccination rate from Hamilton County, it would be great so that we know where we are. I think I said in one board meeting, the estimate was we're probably about 80% at the high school level. If we were that at the elementary level, it would be great to know that. But at the end of the day, I feel very comfortable that our families are able to make the decisions they need to make for their families. The vaccines are available, whichever direction they want to go. And at some point, that means we need to go mask optional. I just want to be prudent about, I don't want to rush it by 2 weeks just to have to put them back on because, it's spreading faster than we thought. So I just.
Yeah, everything that's been said about mask efficacy aside, the data seems to say that we're getting pretty good results from masking here in the school buildings. But in any event, just one question about, and I'm done with this, with the Medical Advisory Board and Omicron. And am I saying that correctly? Sure. Specifically, because the data that I've been reading out of South Africa has been super highly infectious, but not very severe.
Right.
So, some people seem to be saying that reasonable likelihood that there's going to be massive rates of infection that maybe don't amount to much clinically. Is that what the advisory board is seeing, or something different?
Now, what they're saying is the spread rate is high. The question I had that I'm not real comfortable on is, does the vaccine address that variant or doesn't it? And I think there's still information to be found. I think they'll know that pretty shortly. I don't want to.
About case severity?
I'm sorry?
Case severity.
I can speak to it, so you don't have to. The simple answer, they will all say it's too soon to tell. It's impossible after 2 weeks to give an accurate description of what's going to happen amongst all age groups and all populations, all parts of the world. But in South Africa in particular, where they've reported on it extensively, it seems to be more transmissible and less severe. But they're also commenting that it is generally being seen in younger people rather than older people so far. So best case scenario, it's more transmissible, less severe, and like many viruses do over time, that's what happens, and then they become endemic. So endemicity with less severe disease is obviously preferable to endemicity with more severe.
And Eric, have you heard or read anything about Omicron and it reducing COVID antibody protection in a Pfizer vaccine study yet, or?
The data on vaccine protection is really difficult because there's so much variability based on boosters, non-boosters, how long ago you were vaccinated to begin with. So there's no great data on it. It's the concerns have been theoretical more than practical because of the rate of mutations seen in that new variant. But the reality is it's difficult to say anything with any certainty. It doesn't appear to escape vaccine response.
So we'll have the medical advisory board this Friday, as we do every Friday. And then when I meet, I do meet every Wednesday with the board president, board vice president, keep you abreast of kind of where the numbers are. At the end of this week, I'm extremely interested to see how our buildings are doing, because I think this week would be indicative of the first week back from winter break.
Yeah, so you answered my question. I was just going to ask with what frequency the medical board is meeting. So it sounds like it's still meeting every Friday. Is that still comprised of the doctors from Children's as well as the psychologists?
So we have I will send an invite because the doctors obviously are very, very busy. I will send a personal invite if there's a specific topic that we're going to hit, because I don't I don't want to, it's 3 o'clock on a Friday. If we're not going to utilize the information, then I don't want to, I don't want to say waste their time. I want to make sure we're making it a productive conversation. So I've got Dr. Frank. If I know we're going to be talking about vaccines, I will make sure that he is there, he's available. The Dr. Utz has been there every Friday. And then the psychologist, I've got her report and everything that she has stated. It was a concern about the efficacy of masks, and she gave us a lot of information. And so with her, I have not, Dr. Weber, I have not had her back since the first couple that we chatted with her, looked at the efficacy of the masking and did it affect kids' mental health and academics.
I mean, it might be good at some point to try to loop her back in or add her back in to reevaluate.
Sure.
Because we know things are constantly changing, and especially with our kids. So just to do a check-in and see if there's any new research, data, information, things of that nature.
Okay. Any other
And
questions?
my research tells me, Mr. Waterbeed, that you can say Omicron or Omicron. You can also say Omicron if you want, but that's less.
No one's going to make fun of
No.
you.
I would rather call it gone, but right, it's here.
That's good. That's a good plan, yes.
So the next topic that we have, with the update, I will stop right there, and I think we've got the next section.
Okay, we all right with the update?
I'm sorry, Mike, are you done with your superintendent's update?
Yes.
All right, so I do have one other question, and it's keeping track of bus driver availability, and you just tell us where we stand, whether you still have concerns about that area.
Well, I'd probably turn it over to Mr. Ames in terms of if it's changed at all. I know it's always in a dire need of bus drivers, and we've had to double up some routes. I don't know currently if you have any other information.
Has Ms. Pettit put in her substitute application yet?
Can we help her fill it in?
We have not had to double up yet, and we have not run out of drivers. It is every day down to 1 or 2, but so far we've maintained a number of our
Thank you, Mr. Ames. I was going to ask, Mr. Lape, you're keeping track of how our volume is, correct? Okay.
Are we ready to go back to your pictures?
You, yes.
The next section I'll use them, but
Okay.
you go off.
So good. So we have enough drivers. We have had enough drivers so far. We have not had to double any routes. It is down to 1 or 2 people every single day. Luckily, some of our retired drivers have come back to help us out during this time. I know there's 2, maybe even 3 that said, yes, I didn't really want to, but I'll come back and help you out during this time. So thankfully, they have done that, and we've been able to make it. And if we get through Christmas, the holidays, the winter holidays, I believe things will lighten up because we do have a number of people out having surgeries, shoulder surgeries, et cetera, and they should start coming back after the holidays.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jan.
Okay, I think then we move on to
Yes.
your goals.
Yep, so that is item 3.3, the superintendent goals. I provided the Board of Education a couple of weeks ago, sent the superintendent goals, and have reviewed them with the board to the point that we are this evening. And so what I was going to do is just go through the 4 goals and review from a high level what those goals are for this year. And the first one is that I will develop a strategic vision for Loveland City School District involving all stakeholders to determine the direction of the district so that all students have an educational experience, preparing them to be effective lifelong learners and contributors in a global society. I think as I've been here at Loveland and being out and in the community and seeing our kids and understanding what our community is about, I really want to know what are we at Loveland? Who are we? Where do we want to go? And I would love to have a 5-year strategic plan, but it's going to be as it evolves. The length of it will be determined by how we move forward with the strategic vision. But I really would like to be able to move forward and understand what it is we want for our kids at Loveland? What is it that we want to be defined as? And I think that helps when you talk about professional development and all the other departments. How do we want to be best known? How do we want to best serve our kids? We have a portrait of a tiger that gives us a very good roadmap of where we would like to go. I would like to have action steps with finances attached to it. How are we going to get there so that we know where we're going? If it's 2 solid goals, if it's 10 solid goals, we're going to be working through a strategic vision plan and just seeing where do we want to be as a school district. And as a superintendent, in order to lead, I need to know where we're going. And that's the purpose of a strategic vision. The second goal, the superintendent will support the approved 5-year forecast and work in conjunction with the treasurer to achieve the strategic goals set forth by the treasurer. So Mr. Giuffre and I have had many conversations in terms of what his strategic goals would be, as well as mine, being tied into the strategic vision for the district and making sure that we're working together so that we are being great fiscal stewards, but also providing the best possible education for our kids. And what that means and what that looks like, we need to have strategic goals around that. So working with our treasurer and making sure we have that. Goal 3, the superintendent will lead the district administrators in leadership development. Strong leadership at all levels will be developed to support the strategic vision. It's important as a district that we have the best leaders. It's important that we develop all of our administrators and even our teacher leaders. How do we want to develop them? How do we want to look and see where we're going with the strategic vision and who can we have leading that? And sometimes your best leaders are your teachers, and making sure that we have leadership possibilities for them as well. But making sure our district administrators are developed in leadership is going to be very important. Goal 4, develop a communications plan for Loveland City School District that is responsive to students, staff, and community. I've shared with that probably from day one with the Board of Education. That's been the most important thing that I have seen that we needed to make more robust, which is making sure that we're communicating with our students, with our parents, with our community, with our business leaders. I was at a chamber breakfast this morning where I've become a board member on the Little Miami River Chamber Alliance. I got to remember how to say that. And so it's important that we do that so we can see where do we have opportunities for our kids to be out in the community and learn. With that, those are the 4 goals. I present those to the Board of Education and I open up for any discussion. There are specific action plans under each goal. I think I've got it up there. So the links, I will make sure they're available, but the specific action plans are how we're going to move forward with it. I always work better when I've got action plan, I've got deadlines, and I'm checking off where we're going and how we're helping kids. And so I present to you the 4 goals.
So Mike, if I take goals 1 and 2, which is strategic vision, and the financial area with Rob, my assumption is that as you work through the plan, you will determine based on where we and the community think the schools should go, combined with the funding status of the district. Out of that process will emerge any need for future levies. There's nothing stated in any of this that says a levy will be forthcoming at such and such a point in time. That's something that will evolve out of the results of these activities.
Absolutely. It's very well said. I think you want to involve students in the design process. You want to design parents. 2/3 of our community don't have students in our schools. We need to make sure we're providing avenues for the community to be a part of the process. And so I could see where we have open forums inviting any community member to come in and listen. I think it's important when you start to talk about finances, finances are not, they're not stable in that, I don't mean stable in terms of monetarily, but they're not stable because your goals for our kids change. And so when you look at finances, what is it that you want to do for your students and how do we want to get there? And so the strategic vision in my mind is very important to know what is it that we want to accomplish and then attach the finances to it. Is it in the budget? Is it not in the budget? Let the community know if that's what we want for our kids, this is where we need to go. The goal would be that it does remain static and we're able to just adjust where we would like to see our kids going and what this community truly wants. But I think it's important we listen to the whole community and listen to our teachers, parents, and kids. What is it that we want to be known for here at Loveland City Schools? And move forward. And sustainable change takes time. It's not going to be in a year. It takes, in my mind, 3 to 5 years to have sustainable change so that we can make sure we're making a difference for kids. If you look at where education is going, we sat in a meeting today at High Ames, Andrea Connor and I, and it was about strategic foresight. Where are we going? Throughout this pandemic, we turned on a dime and we were online learning. And so we developed this. We had one superintendent say we developed this muscle on how to learn remotely and online. And do we just say, okay, we're done with everything we learned and we go back to where we were? I don't think that's what you want to do. I think you want to be strategic. And how do we access the good things that have come out of COVID? And how do we make sure we're helping our kids? We had Tigers Inc. last board meeting presenting, and I think all of us would say, holy moly, they're pretty sharp. And they're out there doing different things that are not traditional education, and traditional education is changing. We need to be strategic about it and where are we going? And that's where you have great conversations with community members. I have met with so many community members that are extremely interested and very sharp about what we could do for kids. And I'm excited about the process to hear from our community and hear from our teachers and kids and parents. Where do we want to be? I think it's an exciting process, but it also allows us to be good fiscal stewards as we go through it because of our goals.
So I'm always interested in the numbers. And again, just to reinforce what I think you've been saying is that when a discussion about a levy eventually emerges, will be the result of a thoughtful, careful, deliberate process that takes into account both what we're trying to do for kids, what the community thinks we should aspire for our kids, as well as our financial situation. And the commingling of those two will drive ultimately any discussion about a levy somewhere down the road.
Perfect. In my opinion, it's premature to talk any of that until we figure out what is it we want for our kids, what is it we want for our district.
And the public can't see this right now in any detail, but you've given a lot of thought to the strategic planning process. And that's also something that you've got in here and you intend to, I guess, have further discussions.
In January, once we develop the process and how we're going to go forward, I've spent a lot of time on it. It's, in my mind, it is next to communication, and this strategic vision is about communication. That's what we're going to do, right? We're going to communicate with the community and everybody else, all the stakeholders.
And that's two-way.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think as a superintendent, as our leadership team, I would like to be a strong participant in this process. I don't want to be the leader to where it appears that we know the direction. I don't know the direction. I'm excited to see what direction all of our stakeholders want to go. I want to be a very active participant along with all of our administrators. I want to learn. I want to learn where we want to go. And I can tell you that when it comes to fiscal stewardship, that's when I need to make sure that we're aligned and making sure that we're listening to the community. Our community at Loveland does have, it does shoulder a large burden when it comes to the financing of our schools. And we want to make sure we're empathetic and we're listening to that. And we want to make sure we're doing everything we can for our kids as well. So it's an exciting process. And like I said, I'm excited because I don't know where it's going to go. I want to make sure that we are being strategic in our thought and we have this process and we can take the next 5 years and move forward with our kids. And education is changing. Technology is changing. We need to change with it. And it doesn't always mean that means you need more money here or more money there. It just means we need to be strategic before we even start talking about finances.
So good goals. I like these goals.
Thank you.
My only comment would be I'm very happy with the passion that our district always shows, and I hear a lot of, I know what you mean when you say where we want to go and what we want for our kids. But just to clarify it a little more, what we're talking about is what we want to do, what we should do, what is right for us to do for our students academically, for their future as a global citizen, for their mental health, for their safety and their security. I mean, all of that is wrapped up in what we want to do for kids.
That's very well said. We are an awesome district. We do great things for kids every day. Like I said earlier, if it comes out where we have 2 goals that we think we can help our kids, then that's what we owe our kids. That's what we owe this community. But it's a very good point. This district is one of the best districts in the state of Ohio, and all the metrics will show you that. And I'm proud to be here, and I just want to make sure that we are being visionary of where we're going and what we want. Yep.
Anything else?
I appreciate the level of thought that was put into the development of the plan.
Thank you. We do have, and I will get it out, I want to make sure I stress a point that we do have each of our central office administrators have action plans as well attached to that. For example, Mr. Ames, who does business operations, he's got action plans in there. And we want to make sure that, for example, you have the safety action plan and the safety committee and how often they're meeting, and just making sure we're addressing everything we need to address on our day-to-day business and operations.
Well, and I would just reflect exactly what you said, which is we are interested in having this being a wide-ranging process that does not just involve the administration or the teachers or parents of the entire community. And the vision of Loveland as a community is a strong, vibrant, healthy place that families want to live and want to have their children educated. And so we need all the community members to pitch in with that work, whether they have children in school in Loveland or not.
Yeah. Thank you. You know, the other offshoot of this that I'm really going to enjoy as the new superintendent is I am going to get to learn about everything that we do. As you go through a strategic vision process, I'm sure Andrea O'Connor knows a lot more about things that are going on than I do because I've been here for 4 months. But as we sit down, it's going to be very, very interesting and just I'm going to get a lot of good knowledge about what do we do, what's our Hope Squad look like, what's Link Crew, and being able to even house all of that information in a document so that we can show the community this is what we do. I'm excited for that as well.
Yeah, I would just confirm with the board. First of all, this will be added into board docs. This has been on the screen, but it'll be added, these goals will be added into board docs. I would confirm with the board that there is a desire to have a resolution on this agenda that accepts these goals that the superintendent has outlined. That way there's a historical documentation of the goals having been reviewed. So I'm going to confirm that by proposing a motion to amend the agenda to include a resolution to accept the superintendent goals.
Second.
And there's a second from Ms. Pettit. And so all that motion is doing is, again, amending the agenda to put a resolution on for the acceptance of the goals. Any discussion about that? Mr. Giuffre, can we vote on that?
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
Ms. Washburn,
Yes.
Dr. Schwechnow,
Yes.
and Mr. Doherty.
Yes.
Thank you.
At this point, then, I would explain that there is a desire for a resolution for the board to accept these 4 goals that the superintendent has outlined.
Are you making the motion?
I am not. I'm saying that there is a need for a motion.
I move to
Ms. Pettit
accept
is busy at
the
this speed.
superintendent's goals.
Okay, so there is a motion to accept the goals.
I would
Is there a
second.
second? Did I hear you, Dr. Swetchenow? Okay. And as I explained earlier, these will show up on board docs and show up in the minutes, this presentation. Any other questions or discussion?
forgot one point on my superintendent update that I want to make sure I get out there, which is on December 13th at 5:45 in the intermediate school gym here. There will be a dedication to Stan Mccoy Jr. And I say that because I know Stan has a lot of support out there, and I want to make sure we get that out. December 13th at 5:45, we are going to dedicate the intermediate school gymnasium to Stan.
Good display of your communication goal. So that's a good plan there. Okay, anything else? Then, Mr. Giuffre, can we vote on that?
Ms. Pettit?
Yes.
Dr. Schwechsnell?
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz?
Yes.
Mr. Doherty?
Yes.
Yes. Motion carried. Those goals are accepted, and we are on schedule for superintendent goals. Next item on the agenda, unless you have anything else, Mr. Waterbeed.
That is it, Dr. Lorenz.
I'll stop after this meeting. I won't
I'm
call
okay
you
with
Mr.
it. I'm
Waterbeed.
okay with it.
Just for clarification on Kathy's comment about being on schedule, we did agree in hiring Mike that we would do what we just did before the end of this year. So it's just following through on exactly what we said we would do.
I appreciate the cooperation, the collegiality of designing these and being able to listen to the board members in the direction that you would like. And I just appreciate the process, and I'm excited to get started.
Next item, excuse me, I don't know what's happening in my voice. The next item on the agenda is 3.4, the Planning Commission. And so it would be appropriate at this time, if there is any report from Planning Commission board member representatives and for any board discussion concerning the Planning Commission at this point.
Yeah, I can tackle that. The Planning Commission continues to work on several items that they self-identify and are moving forward on the things that they have assigned themselves and that we've talked about having them do over time. One of the challenges that we've identified over time is that having an open-ended planning commission probably doesn't meet with a long-term strategic plan for the school district. And that is something that's going to be examined, not necessarily in conjunction with your strategic vision, but ongoing in light of having a new superintendent since the planning commission started, a new treasurer since the planning commission started. What does the intersection of planning commission and administration look like? So they continue their work. Their next meeting, I believe, is in January, and those conversations are ongoing. I've talked to Donnell Otten. He did not have a specific report back to us on anything that's been produced in the past month, but would like to come and speak to us in the early part of next year, probably not January, but maybe in February.
I would have a question. I know that there have been some challenges as far as reporting and minutes. I think we're up to date with minutes on the website, the Planning Commission minutes on the website. How about our challenges of meeting notifications? All of the regular meetings are on the website, correct?
Correct. To go back, I looked at the meetings just today, and all of them are present.
Okay.
So there may have been some delay in getting those done. But again, I think that, especially as volunteers from the community who are trying to help us move the schools forward, that they're doing as good of a job as they can. They're well aware of the sunshine laws, and I don't see any instances in which those have been violated. There's an argument about what timely production of minutes is. And,
Okay.
you know,
And I also thought there was a question about special meetings, if they were
Right.
announced. And I know there's a little bit of difficulty because obviously the board answers to the treasurer as far as reporting for, announcing meetings and things. But it's a little bit difficult if the planning commission comes through the board to get the message to whoever needs to announce the meeting. So I know there are still some ongoing questions about kind of special meeting
And
announcements.
to my understanding, the only question was with special meetings and were those being announced properly? And that discussion has been had. I don't see that being an ongoing problem.
Okay.
But I'm not doing it. I mean,
Okay.
I'm not announcing the meeting.
Okay. Well, I would just propose to the board that we still need, do we know, I'm assuming that we do not have current numbers of members on the commission. We would need to talk about whether new members need to be appointed. We would need to talk about perhaps the relationship between the board and the planning commission. Is there any desire on the part of the board to have any of that discussion this evening? Or would you like to make that a part of our organizational meeting discussion of administrative committees, board planning commission, all of the things that we organize in?
For my purposes, the planning commission still has a scheduled meeting in January, and they're talking over that themselves. So I kind of like their feedback combined with the feedback from Mike about what the planning commission going forward looks like, rather than us as a board determining, what that looks like, if that makes sense.
Agreed.
When is their meeting in January? Do you know?
If I remember correctly, it's January 5th. But again, I'll make sure that.
So it's after our organizational meeting. So we would then need to, any discussion that we would have at the organizational meeting as far as committees and commissions would not be able to have their feedback unless we did it after the org.
And correct, and that would be, my perception would be that February would be a more appropriate time for us to have those discussions than January.
I don't think there's anything in our organizational list of things to do that says we have to discuss the planning commission. Then I was just trying to determine when it would be discussed.
Yeah. February, that makes perfect sense to me as far as timing and vision and direction.
So status quo on the planning commission structure and process until sometime after we hear from them in February.
And they have I don't want to speak to the technicalities that I don't understand, but they have a few projects that have been identified and are in the process of being completed. Until those projects are completed or abandoned, we can't have wholesale changes in that structure, but the structure needs to be changed at some point. And they're discussing that about what it looks like going forwards. So I don't see any reason for us to interject ourselves into it as they're continuing to work on it.
Until we hear their report.
Right.
Okay. All right. Is that okay with everyone? Is that okay with you, Michelle?
Absolutely. February it is.
Okay. Well, you'll be sure to be at that meeting.
I'm out of town.
Oh, okay. Anything else on the planning commission? Thanks very much, Eric, for the report. All right, then we move along, and we do actually have a couple of resolutions to enact this evening, besides the one we just did. And so the next thing on the agenda is some Loveland High School course offerings. It looks like Connor is going to present to us.
Hello. I'm just coming to you tonight. There are actually linked into board docs our 3 course proposals that we have on the agenda for our high school courses. I do want to start by just kind of reminding the board that we bring new course proposals every year to the board. It doesn't mean that we necessarily offer those. So it's essentially what we do is we create almost like a bank of potential electives, and then we run through the scheduling process. And depending on student interest, it determines whether or not we run that particular course for that year. I wanted to give you kind of a quick update, and just as a reminder, last spring, you approved some courses for the high school, and Mr. Reed, the high school principal, included those in his presentation at the October 20th business meeting. But just to kind of call out, I brought that with me just to kind of give you an idea. So for example, you approved cybersecurity last spring, digital media production 2, weather, ocean climate, astronomy, current events, America's military, U.S. history through film, and U.S. pop culture. And that was quite of a kind of an adjustment. You know, it was a hefty proposal, but I like to remind everybody that we did all that using our current staff. We did not add any additional FTEs to the high school to make that happen. Sometimes it's just readjusting schedules and making sure that we perhaps, put a different number of students in a certain section and then just consider what these offerings are. So to give you an idea, the cybersecurity class, there were 20 students that requested that course, 16 were actually enrolled, and right now we have 1 section of the cybersecurity course that's running. Mr. Marshall teaches that. It's in conjunction with a lot of our UC IT pathway courses and a lot of our technology courses. The digital media production 2 course, That had a smaller interest, but we went ahead and offered it, and we added that in with our Digital Media 1 course. So we literally had 4 students enrolled in that. However, we just linked it with the current Digital Media Production 1. So we were able to kind of differentiate that instruction in there, but those students on their transcript, it will show up as they've taken Digital Media Production 2. Some of this is very exciting. Weather, ocean, and climate, we had 95 students express interest, ended up with 107 kids enrolled. There are 4 sections of the weather, ocean, climate course, high interest in that one. Here's the other really popular one, astronomy. We had 171 students sign up or request astronomy. Actually, 178 students are now in the course. There are 8 total sections, semester sections of the astronomy course. Current events, we had 40 students at request, 24 are now enrolled. Those are 2 sections. America's military, we had 87 with 81 students currently enrolled. We have 4 sections of that course. U.S. history through film, 68 requested, 69 enrolled, 3 sections. And U.S. pop culture, we had 31, 26 are actually enrolled, and we had 1 section. Now, when I say enrolled, that sometimes students are left in a position to have to make a choice because it conflicts with something else. The wonderful thing about what we are starting to develop at the high school, again, are those options. So perhaps students may not be able to, I'm a junior, I'm not able to secure that course this year, but hey, I think I can maybe fit it into my schedule our senior year. Our counseling department's working really hard on our graduation plans and really starting to help students as part of that work with Drews Mitchell when he spoke about the career and college readiness work, is helping our students make some choices early on so they can take advantage of all the wonderful things that we're getting ready, to offer. So that's a quick little update in board docs for the October 20th meeting. This information's here. However, we didn't include the section, so I just added that tonight verbally.
So if I was thinking about this as products being offered to customers, I'd say you've done a pretty good job of understanding your customer because they're buying a lot of the product that you're coming out with. So the question that begs is how do you decide, how do you come up with these course ideas? Because that seems to be working pretty well here.
So our teachers who are with the kids know what their interests are. In fact, in our course proposal, there's a section in all of these that asks for, like, did you give a survey? Did you survey students? So all 3 of the course proposals that are linked in there, we have that in our form. So it's not just to say, hey, I want to teach this class because it's something I really like, right? And sometimes teachers will, and it's something that the kids are enjoying as well. But then we kind of challenge them to say, well, how do you know that there's an interest in that? And we've kind of pushed the staff to kind of look at how are you gathering that information? And a lot of our teachers do it through surveys. And then so when they send the proposals over, you'll notice some of the wording in here is, I surveyed X number of students. I believe this is one that would have interest. And then, as I said, we have an entire list of courses at our high school, particularly that are resting there as electives. We'll send out they'll start scheduling in February, and that'll give us a pretty good idea of which ones are going to be able to run this year, and if we have the staff to be able to adjust some schedules and make sure that happens. So it's kind of exciting stuff. So the 3 courses that are linked in here are 2 courses from our English department. One I'm really, both of these are really great, but this one I'm very excited about because one thing that we're noticing is our population of ELL students is changing a bit in Loveland. And we have an English teacher that came to us and said, look, I have these ELL learners, English isn't their first language, and, their ability is much higher than I think we realize. It's the language that's a barrier. She is trained and has worked in the past in a different district with ELL students. So she came and proposed a class that's called Language Learning Lab. And so that's linked in here, and it's specifically designed to have for our 9th and 10th grade ELA students an option for them to be a part of, receiving some of those supports for their language. So that one I'm really excited about because I think that is something that we are to notice in Loveland is that demographics change. We notice that quite a bit with our younger students. It's now reaching our high school. And so we have someone that said, hey, I really feel like this is a need. We're at a point we could run one ninth grade section and one 10th grade section and make sure that our students are getting challenged academically and that the language difference does not cause the barriers to their learning. So very excited about that.
Can I interrupt for just
Yeah.
a second? The question I would have is obviously that's different than a typical elective that people will opt into.
Right.
I read the report and I see how
Yeah.
people will be identified. Do we have an idea of how many kids we're looking at that you think will be in these classes? Obviously, they're not scheduling in February like children are choosing mystery fiction.
Right. So
Which
these,
is what I took in my senior year of high school.
right. So these students are already identified. We already know coming in at the beginning of every school year who our students are, our ELL students. This is especially for our kids who are in ninth grade, this is a collaborative process between our middle school and our high school teachers. So between the 8th and 9th grade year, there's this discussion about these are the students coming up. You have, X number of EL students. What would that look like? I think that the last discussion I had with the high school on this is that they felt like there might be enough to do one 9th grade section and one 10th grade section. This is their English requirement, right? So they're taking this class. This becomes kind of a piece. There is a second page to this that talks about this particular current schedule and potentially what a new schedule might be. You also notice on here, this teacher is teaching the English 9 enrichment and the English 10 enrichment currently. And this is how she discovered that this was a need because those students were placed in the English enrichment course, which tends to be a course for a little bit more intense interventions for students. And she's like, wait a minute, this isn't a cognitive consideration. It's more of the language barrier. And I think we can just be more purposeful in how we attack the instruction and interventions with that population. So,
Great.
yeah. The second English course is the Mystery and Detective Literature. This one's I would love to take this class. I think what's interesting about the teacher that proposed this, she requested to go back into the classroom. She's been serving as a media specialist for several years at our high school. And when you read her report, it's basically like, hey, kids check out these books. Kids are still really interested in this. She also administered a survey and she's like, this is a no-brainer in her view because the kids are going to gravitate towards this. I already know this because they're already asking for this material. So
I loved this sentence in here in the rationale. The goals of the course are to introduce more sophisticated literature, to gain an in-depth understanding of the genre, to apply the scientific method and powers of observation, and to practice in writing opinion, expository, analytical, and narrative writing. Talk about a different pathway to developing critical thinking and expressing critical thinking. It's a whole nother pathway, and I loved reading that part.
right, yeah, and she even has like the list of all of the books, all the sources.
I think it's really important because I think that what we have moved to in language arts and English and the way we teach reading and the way we teach writing, we've moved into a lot of nonfiction, which we should. There are texts that students need to be introduced to, but I think this is a way to move back into some of the reading that we enjoy, reading for enjoyment. So not that this will be just a fun class, but it's a way to bring back the idea of a genre instead of just saying, well, we're going to have English 9, we're going to have English 10, we're going to have English 11, and we're going to read this kind of text, this kind of text, this kind of text. This is I think it's a good way to get back into some interesting reading.
So is this teacher going back full-time to teaching?
Yes.
You're going to do both?
Yes, she's back in the classroom full-time. Yes. So I think this one will load. I mean, when I say load, I mean, there's going to be a large request for that. And I don't think we're going to have any trouble filling those. It might be a bit of us having maybe more students than we can actually, handle. So we'll have to see. When that happens, what we tend to do is give those opportunities for seniors first and then kind of.
I was going to say, so how the way you would decide who gets it is a mystery, right?
Yeah, it's a mystery. Yes, I like that.
Is it a semester or a year long?
Yeah, that one's a semester. Yeah, semester. And this final one is called Enrichment Biology. So you've already noticed that I mentioned and called out on the one instructor schedule the English enrichment courses. So we also have that same model for our math department. And what we're noticing is we need a very similar model in our biology. That biology is an end of course requirement for students. Our current juniors, the class of 2023, a lot of those more stringent graduation requirements are coming back into play. So we've had a little bit of flexibility the last few years because of the COVID disruption. And we are now back to, with the kids who are going to be seniors next year, saying, okay, we have to make sure they have those graduation points. And if they don't have the graduation points, do we have something in play with all of the other options for kids to receive their diplomas? This one actually I really enjoy because since I've been in Loveland, I've been talking a little bit about how we're really approaching our interventions with kids who don't pass the test, let's say. And, you know, we can provide all those interventions in the lower grades, but when you get to high school, those assessments become a little bit more important, right? Because all of a sudden that's your graduation and that feels weighty to students. And if you have a student who's struggling, what are we doing to meet those needs? The biology teacher proposed this. It's pretty lengthy and she can tell she did a lot of work on this. But she, on her own, does a lot of intervention for biology to help these students prep and be ready to pass that assessment. Our biology department at our high school has a very high success rate with students. But what they're looking at is a model where let's say that these kids take this as a sophomore, freshman, sophomore typically would take the biology. And then let's say they need to retake that test. They didn't pass it. So the following year, they would enroll, let's say first semester, I'm going to enroll in this biology enrichment course. So it's part of my day. And I'm receiving a semester's worth of instruction, and this teacher would be our teacher leading this. And then that student would retake that assessment in our December testing window. Retest in December, we retest in the spring, and we retest in the summer. We provide those other options. This is a very similar model to what we're already doing with our English and our math departments. And we're finding that that helps us kind of make sure we're being more intentional. And so we're not just saying to kids, hey, come to some after school tutoring 1 or 2 days a week and then you'll get it. It's really more purposeful. This teacher also on her own willingly linked in her value added reports, which is powerful because she's showing the growth that she has with the students. And I think that kind of reaffirms why this particular teacher, as well as her approach, is working for all kids and why we need to be a little bit more mindful about approaching this. And so let's say the student is successful that first round in December, then, you know, their second semester, they're enrolled in something else, right? Like you don't have to stay in the class if you've received what you need. The other really nice part of that about this is if this is a student who, let's say, because we do have this as well, students who perhaps scored high enough on the end of course test, but didn't actually earn that course credit because of, for whatever reason. Sometimes it's just, for some of our students, it's not ability, it's will. And so they tend to mature a little bit in high school, and then they say, ooh, I really should handled that way. I need another do-over, right? And so what happens is we could also use this option to help recoup that credit requirement for biology as well. So really what I'm bringing to you are these 3 courses, just to say we're going to run these. I believe that we're going to have no trouble filling all of these. I'm really anxious to kind of see how the language learning lab develops and to see what kind of successes we can kind of build in for our students and our populations that's changing.
So I remember not too many weeks ago, we were talking about testing results. And a lot of the discussion was about how we as a district will make the added effort to help bring kids further along. And I know this isn't exactly the same thing as what we were talking about back then, but philosophically, it's very much in the same vein that all of these are targeted at taking kids and helping them progress further in these 2 major areas.
Right.
for different reasons in every case. But I think this is really great stuff to be hearing that you're working on.
It's fun. It's fun stuff. And I love that our teachers are passionate about that, and that's what they bring to the table.
Yeah.
And that the impact that these courses have, because it's created by the teachers, they've studied it, they see the need, that's only the more
And they own
powerful
it.
for the students. Yep. Absolutely.
Andrea, if we are adding in an ESL class, language learning lab, are we still going to be contracting with the Hamilton County? Yeah.
So we have those individuals serve as consultants. So that is kind of an unknown right now, at least at our high school level. To be honest, I mean, we use EL support at our high school, but I have to be honest, a lot of their support comes at our younger grades, I find. And so, yes, we do the minimum that's required. What this is going to allow us to do is to be more purposeful and make sure we build in successes. I cannot speak yet what that contract with Hamilton County would look like. But we do need obviously some additional supports, especially at a lot of our younger grades, to make sure that we're meeting all the needs of those kiddos as well. But I can't really fully answer what that might look like by this spring, if that makes sense.
And you talked about the need for the class due to an increase. Do you know from year to year what percentage growth we're having as far as ELLs?
I do not know the exact percentage growth. I know it's Russian and Uzbeki, basically. Uzbekistan is what we're seeing. That is our largest growth. What we do know, and especially with our partnerships with Nest, who does a lot of our service with most of our EL students, is that they're due to work that we often have our groups of families who move in. And parents, of course, and I think Ms. Washburn, you probably know some of the barriers with non-English speaking parents is understanding some of those things those documents that we need signed and all those other pieces. So to even get to the educational piece for those students is there's all these other barriers. There's trust issues, there's concerns, but there is evidently like a trucking company in the area who is why a lot of that population this area. And so we've really been trying to utilize Nest a lot for that at-home connection that we're finding that we're missing. And also as students get older naturally, even if our own English-speaking students tends to be less parent engagement perhaps as students age. And we're starting to know that that is even another layer with these kids. I don't know the exact, it's changing. Those are also transient populations right now. So it's hard for us to get a real strong grip on what I would tell you today might be very different in 2 months because it's depending on their jobs. So.
Okay. And sorry. How were the programs chosen? I saw that you're subscribing to Language Live and No Reading.
I think these are just proposals. So this teacher has used in another district and where she taught. So she's saying these may include these resources. It's not saying that she would, and it's not saying that there wouldn't be something else. It would be if we have to adopt or purchase a program, I would be bringing this in the spring, and that would be something that we would put back in front of you. Any other questions?
Anything else? That was a great report. It's always enjoyable to find out what we're teaching our
Right.
kiddos. You know, sometimes we have to build the buildings to put them in, and we have to do, all sorts of things, and that was super.
Oh, wait,
So,
I did have another question. Sorry. You just rolled your eyes at me.
I did roll my eyes at you. Can you see that on the screen?
It's about the mystery and detective course. And it's not going to be a popular thing to say necessarily, but I think it does sound very interesting. I'd love to teach it. I'd love to take it. But I'm just wondering, it says that there would be no additional staff needed. If we have the ability and the capacity to add in additional electives, why wouldn't we opt instead to potentially use that teacher for more gap closing opportunities like we are in science.
We do have some teachers that are doing that right this year, have some different duties. We do have a teacher that was running senior service in her schedule. She's an English teacher, so there is some flexibility. And a lot of this honestly depends on numbers. So as we notice enrollment sizes per grade level, we analyze that, we take a look at that, and we determine like, oh, so maybe this class of sophomores had more students in it. And so you're required, your English 10, what is required, perhaps has more students in it, but the class coming up, who will be 10th graders next year, there are fewer students, so we can grab some flexibility out of a teacher's schedule and make sure that happens. Right now, from our projections, because there's a duty that's sitting in a teacher's schedule at our high school, is that this would be able to run, or we would be able to offer some level of this in our current schedule. And I'm not saying it wouldn't be making it smaller and making gap closing, but we're also working on that in those enrichment classes. We already have that built in. That's why our value added at our high school is off the charts, because we use those courses for that. It may not be that students are necessarily all passing the assessment, but it's that the growth that those students are seeing from those classes is because we have made those smaller, specific enrichment classes. Those are already exist in our English and math.
What's the average size of the enrichment?
So right now they're looped. So you might have a ninth grade English class that has 10 students in it. And then those 10 students are looped in with a different teacher. So it's team taught. And then the student receives more intensive instruction in a different course. So essentially they're taking 2 bells of an English, 2 bells of a math. Those run anywhere from 10 to 15 students. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Unless there's any other discussion, then I would move to approve those 3 course offerings.
I'll second.
Ms. Pettit seconded. Any other discussion or questions? I promise I won't roll my eyes.
I think Ms. Pettit should have moved that. Yes.
Mr. Giuffre, can we vote on that, please?
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
Dr. Schwetchnow.
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
You said so much, I don't even know what we're voting on.
We're approving the course offerings.
Yes.
Mr. Doherty,
Yes.
Motion carried.
That was a perfect opportunity. I set you up there to roll your eyes.
I said I wasn't going to roll my eyes anymore.
I didn't believe you, but you
Okay, moving on.
That's what I was trying to do, and I'm getting thwarted at every turn. So
Resources.
the next item is Human Resources Resolutions. Step right up, Mr. Carter.
Collier is back.
I'm back. All right, guys. You can see here in board docs that we have 4 different sections here, some things that have been happening since the last time that we had a board meeting. The ones that are highlighted in yellow, just later additions to make sure that this might be, depending upon when you checked board docs last, some of those may have been added. I want to make sure to congratulate Section C. We had a health aide, Miss Hosea, if you remember, had a resignation, and we have found her replacement. So we're really excited about Christina T. McCoy to be a part of the group at LECC. And then I want to make sure, before I bring Mr. Ames up here, to give you a little bit of information. Section D, I am really excited about. We talk about substitutes a lot and the difficulty of having substitutes. And in Section D, you can see that there are 3 different folks that we are adding to our substitute list for custodial help. So that is a hip, hip hooray to be able to do that. So I want to make sure to point that out. And then there was a resignation in Section A. It's number 2 from Mr. Jones. And I'm going to have Mr. Ames come up here. When Mr. Jones sent in his letter for his retirement, he had some nice things to say, and I want Mr. Ames to be able to read that to you guys tonight.
Yes, Tim came to us as a retiree. He had retired from his original position and decided he wanted to do something else. And so he applied for a bus driver's job. And finally, he decided it was time to hang up. But he, in his letter, said, "I want to thank Greg Osee for allowing me to drive the Loveland City School students to and from one of the best school districts in the country. I also want to thank Kevin Fancher for allowing me to spend lunchtime with first and second graders, pushing them on swings, playing kickball, opening Go-Gurt packages, and doing my part to make their lunchtime fun. I will miss them." And I know Tim will. He had the greatest time with our kids, and we will truly, truly miss him. So just thought you might hear somebody that's very happy to have worked with us.
We appreciate that. You know, one of the things that we have lost during COVID is the ability to recognize new hires and retirees and have them have a chance to be talked about and have them say things. So thanks for bringing that to us.
Oh, you're welcome.
I think that was absolutely awesome. I appreciate you doing that, and I say congratulations to him. And I have been able to interview so many different bus drivers and Mr. Osee and everything that goes on there. But if you've ever tried to open a Go-Gurt package, it's pretty difficult. So I understand.
It is.
That is true. Thank you, Mr. Ames, for coming up and reading that message from Mr. Jones. Are there any questions?
Yeah,
Yes.
can you express our thanks to him? It's, it's a rare message like that that puts people into the work that goes on here. Yeah, sure sounds like it.
That's awesome.
Sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. I'm glad that we were able to recognize him some way, just like Dr. Lorenz had mentioned. Sometimes we aren't quite back to all of the things that we used to do to be able to recognize folks, especially when they're retiring. So I wanted to make bring that up. Are there any questions about the HR section that we just went over?
My only question was that one additional bus driver or that over what we discussed last time? As far as there was 2 resignations the last meeting for bus drivers.
Yes. So anything that was on the agenda for this time, this would have been since the last meeting. So if there were 2 last time, this would include this one for this time.
But the last time we were already scraping the bottom of the barrel. We had, I think, 2 subs instead of 4. We're now down to 0 subs instead of 2. 0 flex. Just wanted to make sure I understood where we stand. You mentioned it. I just want to hear how critical our need is for bus drivers.
Oh, it is critical. During that last, we did have 2, and then Tim's been off for a while, so this is not anything that we just decided. But as I said, we are able to bring, or some of our retiree bus come back to help us. And there always are taking retirees.
There's a reason I asked that question.
Anyone in particular?
So we are still able to make it right now, but, a sickness goes through a group where we may be in trouble.
There's one additional thing I'd like to point out to that, is that we also did have a bus driver that was on a leave of absence who is now back with us again. So,
Gives you a little bit.
just looking at the number of folks who are retiring and the number of people on, depending upon what the situation is. So there was a couple of other things in there as well to even things out.
Great,
But
thanks.
can that person who returned, can they open a Go-Gurt package?
I don't know. It takes quite the talent, but I hear that Ms. Pettit is probably really, really strong. So, Ms. Pettit, we're always looking for really great help, so.
I hear Mr. Waterby does a great job.
I thought that was Mr. Blockhead.
Any other questions? All right, then, can we vote on that, Mr. Giuffre?
No?
No.
I have a motion.
No one's
I
moved
moved.
it. Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. Go ahead. Ms. Pettit moved.
Yeah, I moved.
Is there a second? I'll second it.
Ow.
Okay, then.
On.
You are giving me a hard time this evening. I'm going to roll my eyes.
It's all for Michelle.
She can't make the motion and second it as well.
Put her down, put on the adjournment.
I can open a Go-Gurt.
Mr. Giuffre, can we vote on this,
Ms.
please?
Pettit,
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz.
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Mr. Doherty.
Yes.
Dr. Schweitzer.
Yes.
Motion carried. And now we come to,
I move that this meeting be
Ms.
ended.
Pettit has moved that we adjourn this meeting. Is there a second?
I'll second.
If nobody seconded, Michelle, we couldn't adjourn the meeting. You'd have to stay.
Stuck with us forever.
Oh,
Mr.
thank you,
Dufresne,
Eric.
we're going to vote on that right now.
Ms. Pettit.
Yes.
Dr. Schweitzer.
Yes.
Doherty. Dr. Lorenz.
Yes.
Ms. Washburn.
Yes.
There, Drew says.
Motion carried.
No.
I have us adjourned at 9:42. Thank you all very much.